Hello, Kelly.
And a couple of announcements. One is we have a couple of oversights, errors. The spelling Laurie Jones, it's L-O-R-I-E. We apologize for that. And on the back page, special assistant sets, these are not necessarily, some of these people are not necessarily people who are in the course, but they did volunteer some time to help us out, and we certainly appreciate that. We want to recognize everybody. Lauren Houston did not get on here. That was an oversight. I'm sorry about that, but she did do a good job. And to her, we owe partial thanks for the sets. Another thing I want to say is that up there in the window, we have someone who won't be able to take a bow, and she's done a great job for us, and that is Grace Chang. So let's give the other thing, some of the students, the young ladies have asked me to make a disclaimer. They want you to understand, as the audience, that there are some views in here in the play which may seem quaint by today's standards. In particular, Dawn Imperial wants Mrs. Russell to know that she has not left the true faith, which Mrs. Russell has spent so much time instructing her in. And as for the young men, they want their mothers to know that there should not be any wrath due them, that they are just acting. And I guess that covers it, so with that, we'll begin.
It was wonderful, dear.
I hope we weren't too loud, Mrs. Marshall.
Not loud, Alan. Exuberant.
What's the point in singing at all if you have to sing quietly? I thought it had a grand bill, and I'm nominating all of you, honorary Highlanders.
What next, Dr. Marshall? Hail Caledonia, or maybe the road to the Isles?
Or Sweet and Low. Remember, I have a little boy upstairs who's trying to sleep.
Singers, let's rest on our laurels. It is a little late. We should be leaving.
No, don't rush off like that. Who'll have more tea?
I'd like a little more, Mrs. Marshall.
Fine, Joe. And what about another piece of cake?
Well, I've already had 2.
Three's the charm, Joe. Eat up.
I'll have some more tea, Mrs. Marshall.
You earned the second cup, Nancy. You sang like a true lassie.
It's easy to sing when you lead us, Dr. Marshall.
And what about you two? Will you have more tea and cake? Or are you living on a diet of love alone these days?
Peter.
Well, Kate, they are engaged, and engaged people have been known to love love. Or is that an old-fashioned notion, George?
I don't think so, sir.
And what about you, Susan? You've been as quiet as a mouse all evening. A church mouse, that is.
I
Just haven't had anything to say.
You're getting a rare woman for a wife, George. The sweetest variety.
Don't let them badger you, Susan. Come, have more tea.
Thank you, Mrs. Marshall.
I'll get the tea for you, Sue.
Never mind, I'll go.
Lost in meditation, Alan?
No, sir. I was thinking how different these meetings are now. I mean, since you're a pastor at New York Avenue.
You mean noise, yeah?
Oh, no, sir. I mean, well,
He means now they're fun.
that's right, Nancy.
Had a hard time saying the word fun, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Because it's still not easy to associate fun with a church meeting.
I guess that's it, sir. You know my aunts.
Indeed I do. Miss Judith and Miss Jessie. Well, I'm glad you're having fun, because I am too.
I think it's so wonderful, Dr. Marshall, the change you've made.
It's no special change, I think, Barbara.
Oh, it is. Why, do you know how many there were in our young people's group before you came? 12.
Now we have over 200.
Still, it's not been all my doing. You've all worked hard.
Sure, because you made us want to work. Why, till you came, I wouldn't have thought of belonging to this bunch.
We never did anything but sit and look solemn. I belonged just because my aunts had belonged when they were young.
Oh, it was dreadful. And then you came, Dr. Marshall.
Now, New York Avenue is known as Young People's Church.
So I've been told, but I can't take credit for it.
You should, Dr. Marshall. The reason we come is because you treat us as if we had some sense. You're not always telling us what we do wrong, what's bad about us. You tell us what's right, what's good. Maybe if there were more people like you, kids wouldn't feel so desperate today. Maybe we could sit down and talk things out. I just wanted to say, I thought you should take credit, Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, Joe. It's good to know your feelings. Not everyone's as exuberant about my work as you are, but if you enjoy worshiping God, I'm glad. That's the way I feel it must be. Why can't we serve Him with a smile and a song, as well as with a sigh? And I've talked myself dry, Kate.
I think that evenings like this are good for all of us.
We still haven't decided what to do about the youth room.
Before we go back to that, Dr. Marshall, I'd like to ask a favor.
Ask, Nancy.
Well, my high school has quite a reputation in Washington for being tough.
Tough? Goodness, I'd be scared to go there.
Lots of kids feel that way. In fact, it's gotten so bad, we can't get speakers for our assemblies.
You mean the speakers are afraid of the students?
That's right, Dr. Marshall. The kids are terrible. I've seen them drive a speaker off the stage. Booing, stamping, throwing things. It sounds awful.
What's a favor you wanted to ask, Nancy?
Well, I'm on the senior assembly committee, and we thought that maybe, if just once, the students could hear someone like you.
I see. You want to play Nero,
Nero?
throwing a Christian to the lions.
We've got such a full schedule. I know. Dr. Marshall would like to say yes, Nancy, but he has so many engagements, and there's been criticism of his speaking so often outside the church. I understand, but I had to ask. We hate to disappoint you, dear, but we must draw the line somewhere. Isn't that true, dear?
Oh, yes, Kate. Yes, indeed. Mrs. Marshall is 100% right. That's a failing of hers. I am overbooked. I have been criticized for outside speaking. I should draw the line.
It's all right, Dr. Marshall.
But I must be very, very careful where I draw that line. I might want to step across it one day.
Peter.
When was it you wanted me to speak, Nancy?
Oh, Dr. Marshall, are you sure?
I'm sure it's only me poor wife who has her doubts.
Well, to give you plenty of time, we have an assembly scheduled for November 10th. That's a Friday afternoon at 2.
6 weeks off, I'll be there.
Be prepared for the worst. They use pea shooters, shoot paper wads, and throw pennies.
All contributions will be gratefully accepted. As for the pea shooters, I may come armed myself. You draw a grand line, Mrs. Marshall, but you'll forgive me for pretending it wasn't there this once.
This once.
Now, on with the business of this meeting.
We come back to the same problem, sir. The youth room.
When there are only a dozen kids, that alone was all right.
But now it's impossible.
We wouldn't need much money to fix the room up if we did all the work ourselves. Surely the trustees...
The trustees are enthusiastically in favor of improving the youth room, as long as it doesn't cost any money.
How much would we need?
We could do a lot of $100.
Why doesn't the group sponsor some fundraising activities?
Like a bake sale, Mrs. Marshall?
That's a possibility.
We might give a concert. Dr. Marshall could sing Scotch songs.
A bonny notion, but I've got a better idea.
What is it?
Let the young people put on a play.
A play! That's a very good idea, dear.
It's a great deal of work, but it can be very satisfying.
Have you ever acted, Dr. Marshall?
Oh, indeed he has. He was a sensation in Atlanta.
Would you help us, sir? As much as I can. You'd have to choose a play.
What play were you in, Dr. Marshall?
I forget the name, but it was a grand success. I played an Arab sheik.
An Arab sheik? Oh, you must have been wonderful.
The first Arab in the history of the theater with a Scotch fur.
I was persuaded to take the role.
You can imagine how difficult that was.
This was before my marriage, and there were no lines drawn for me.
Oh yes, he was much, much freer.
I can just picture you in an Arab costume, Dr. Marshall.
It was dashing. We worked very hard to be authentic.
Excuse me.
That may be my mother, Mrs. Marshall.
Your mother?
Do you remember any of your lines, Dr. Marshall?
Let me see. Maybe if I got into the spirit.
Goodness, you really look like an Arab.
Yubi Mignon, she was the heroine.
Mignon? What a romantic name.
Now, Mignon is alone. Suddenly, I appear, and you say, "Are you a genie?"
Are you a genie? All right.
You're lying, you're lying.
Are you a genie?
No, madame. I am an Arab.
Peter, dear, a very pleasant surprise.
Not now, Kate. Can't you see I'm an Arab? I am Ali, Prince of the House of Hashim, descended of Ali, the son of Fatima, the daughter of Khadijah, the first and beloved wife of the Prophet Muhammad.
Please, Dr. Marshall.
Main character, you're Mignon. I'm Ali. There's no one else here. That's very important.
Peter!
I have come to take you away. Away, far, far. Miss Pickle and Miss Pickle.
Dr. Marshall.
Won't you come in?
We seem to be interrupted.
Dr. Marshall was showing us a scene from a play, Aunt Judith. The young people thought they might try to put on a play, to raise funds for decorating the youth room.
I believe it was made clear at the last meeting of the trustees that the church has more immediate problems than redecorating the youth room.
But if we raise
Alan,
money...
I came here to speak with Dr. Marshall.
Yes, Aunt Judith.
Of course, if we're intruding.
Oh no, Miss Pickle, we are delighted to see you.
That was obvious.
The meeting was just breaking up.
Oh, we really shouldn't have dropped in at this hour.
But it's so difficult to catch Dr. Marshall in these days with all his outside interests.
Well, I thought the idea of putting on a play was just perfect.
We'll present it to the whole group.
Good night, Dr. Marshall, Mrs. Marshall.
Good night, Barbara.
I'll tell the kids at school we can count on you, Dr. Marshall.
I'll be on hand, Nancy. Meanwhile, I'll practice dodging paper wads.
Good night. Thanks for the cake and tea.
Oh, there's plenty of cake left in the kitchen if you'd like, Joe.
No thanks, Mrs. Marshall. Dr. Marshall, sometime when you've got a minute, there's something I'd like to talk over with you.
Of course, Joe. Anytime. Good night.
I'll help you with the dishes, Mrs. Marshall.
That's very thoughtful, Susan, but you needn't stay.
I'd like to. I'm waiting for my mother to pick me up anyway.
Why should your mother pick you up? I'll take you home.
No, I'd rather you didn't, George.
But Sue,
Please, I'll call you later. Good night.
what's happening with Sue and me, Mrs. Marshall?
Let me talk with you, George.
I'd appreciate it. Good night.
Good night, George. Won't you ladies sit down?
You may wait for us outside, Alan.
All right, Aunt Judith. Good night, Dr. Marshall. Mrs. Marshall.
Good night, Alan. Now, could I offer you ladies some tea and cake?
Oh, why, that might be very...
No, thank you, Mrs. Marshall.
Then if you'll excuse me.
I'm sure Mrs. Marsh will be right back.
Of course.
Catherine.
I'm all right. I must have turned my ankle.
I'm sure you must be tired, Dr. Marshall.
Oh no, not at all.
I find it fatiguing just to read of your comings and goings.
If New York Avenue's never had a minister who was so in the public eye, that was a lovely...
Jessie!
Sorry, Judith.
It may seem to you that I spend a great deal of my time with my outside speaking engagements.
Indeed it does.
It's very hard for me to refuse.
As pastor of New York Avenue, you should be mature enough to put first things first.
First things first.
Exactly. Your first responsibility is to New York Avenue.
I've tried not to be neglectful of my duties.
You're a very young man. Some seem to find your energy, your enthusiasm refreshing. To me, it is disturbing.
I see.
Do you? New York Avenue has been our life. My sister and I have grown up here. We've listened to many great ministers speak in our church. We cherish its traditions.
I can understand that, Miss Bickle.
One of those traditions, Dr. Marshall, is moderation in all things.
Moderation? And you feel that I'm immoderate?
I'm sure Judith only needs them.
Yes, I think you are. You forget the dignity of your position. You cater entirely too much to those teenagers.
I feel that there is important work to be done with young people, but I have never...
Long-time parishioners like my sister and me are elbowed aside by adolescents who are attracted by the flashy aspects of your ministry.
Oh, Judith, I don't think you meant...
Kindly stop telling me what I mean and don't mean, Jessie.
I am deeply aware, Miss Bickle, of my responsibility to these young people. If they are attracted to the church because of me, it is only that they have a deep hunger for God, but He is still not real to them. I have to find a way to make Him real.
Your methods are much too unorthodox for New York Avenue, Dr. Marshall. The Church of the Presidents needn't resort to sensationalism to attract the type of church member we want.
The type of church member you want, Miss Bickle, is...
Another example of what I mean, immoderation.
I'm sorry I was so long.
I was saved by the bell.
We've so enjoyed your nephew, Alan. He's such a fine young man, a real credit to your care.
Alan is sweet, isn't he? We could build closer to...
Alan is stubborn and undisciplined in many respects. He wastes too much time, like this foolish painting he does.
Surely painting is a healthy outlet.
In recent months, I've noticed a marked increase in his irreverent attitudes.
I've never found Alan irreverent.
In fact, we hoped he might have a call to the ministry. Why, with a little encouragement,
We'll guide Alan in the choice of his vocation, and if we should ever need any assistance, we'll ask for it.
I only meant that...
You mustn't feel, Mrs. Marshall, that Judith doesn't...
Jessie, I did not come here to discuss my nephew. As you know, I am president of the New York Avenue Missionary Society.
Of course.
Since the society's founding, it has been customary for the pastor to address the autumn meeting. I presume it will not work a hardship on you, Dr. Marshall, to be present this year.
I'm looking forward to it.
Good. We meet Friday afternoon, November 10th at 2.
November 10th, but that's...
Last year, I did not feel your remarks were pertinent, Dr. Marshall. So I've prepared a few notes for your guidance in the preparation of this year's address. I trust you'll find them helpful.
I'm sure I will.
Come, Jessie. Alan is waiting.
I'll see you to the door, Miss Bickle.
Dr. Marshall, you mustn't take Judith too seriously. She has very definite ideas about everything.
I've
The
noticed.
thing to do is stand up to her. Don't be intimidated.
Jessie!
Yes, Judith?
You did know me, dear.
Get my soda box. The inner man is seething.
Now, Peter, you're taking so much soda.
I'm flashy, sensational, immature, immoderate, and attracting the wrong kind of people to New York Avenue. It was very, very fortunate, Kate, that 9 o'clock struck when it did.
You know Judith Bickle's speaking for only a handful. Why, the majority of the congregation...
That isn't the point. The feeling is here, Kate. When I stand in the pulpit, I remember it. It hampers and restricts me. Maybe I do move too fast. Maybe it's wrong to accept outside speaking engagements. But I can't refuse. It's not in me.
If only I could help more.
No man could ask for more help. Just to know you're with me is a great comfort. A man needs his wife to lean on.
And I want to be strong. For your sake, Peter. Strong and steady.
I'm so sorry.
No apology is called for. Susan, please, come in. Sit down.
Susan's troubled about her engagement to George.
Troubled in what way?
The idea of marriage seems to frighten Susan.
Well now, I think it's fine to be in awe of marriage, Susan. But to be scared?
George thinks it's childish.
Have you discussed it with your mother?
Oh no, Mother's so busy.
Not too busy to be concerned about your happiness.
That's probably Mother now.
I'll ask her in.
You love George, don't you, Susan?
I thought I did.
And George loves you.
Dear, you remember Mrs. Grant, Susan's mother?
Of course, Mrs. Grant. How nice to see you again.
Thank you. Sorry to be so late in calling for Susan. If you're ready, dear.
Yes, Mother.
Susan tells us she's uncertain about her marriage.
She shouldn't have bothered you, Dr. Marshall.
It's no bother. We're very fond of Susan and of George.
It's a mood that will pass. George is a fine young man with a great deal of promise. Susan couldn't do any better. And besides, it isn't as if she had a choice. She's not prepared to make a career. Marriage is her only answer.
You have had a most successful career, haven't you, Mrs. Grant?
I've no complaints. I have more commissions than I can handle.
Your husband is in government service, I believe.
Yes, Stephen has the same job he did when we were married.
I was wondering, perhaps you and your husband, Susan and George, could have dinner with Catherine and me one evening soon.
Stephen and I'm afraid not, Dr. Marshall.
Surely one evening.
Nothing would be gained by bringing Stephen into the matter.
Isn't he already concerned? He's Susan's father.
Your suggestion is impractical, Dr. Marshall. Come along, Susan. It's late. I still have 3 hours of work to do. Good night, Dr. Marshall, Mrs. Marshall.
Good night, and thanks.
Good night, Susan.
And please, don't say anything more to Mother.
Something's very, very much amiss in that family, Kate.
I held my breath. I thought you were about to lecture Mrs. Grant on the folly of mixing marriage and a career.
It occurred to me. Then I looked at the clocks. It's a long way till 10, so I couldn't count on the bell to save me again.
I'm so sorry for Susan.
I still mean to bring that family together. And when we do, we'll see the reason for Susan's being afraid to marry. I'm in dire need of soda. What with being an heir of Sheehan, listening to Judith Bickle.
Judith Bickle! Oh, dear, I forgot.
What did you forget?
The meeting of her missionary society. It's November 10th at 2.
So, I'll have plenty of time to memorize the notes.
But November 10th at 2. That's when you promised Nancy you'd speak at our high school assembly.
Soda. I've got to have soda. I need an immoderate amount of soda.
Dr. Marshall's residence. Yes, Senator. Yes, he's here. Just a moment. Senator James Knox Polk. He sounds upset.
This is not a night. How are you, Senator? Good to hear from you. As neighbors, we don't seem to see much of each other. Yes, Senator. Yes, we did have you with me here tonight. Now, Senator, I'm sure, Senator, that none of our young people... I know you're an authority on juvenile delinquency, but these young people... I'm sure, Senator, that none of our young people would trespass on your property or try to break into your garage. No, Senator, no. I will not insult these young people by questioning them. You may take the matter up with my trustees if you like. Good night, Senator. Oh, for the wings of a dove.
What was that all about?
Our good neighbor, Senator Polk, thinks some of our young people are trying to steal equipment from his garage.
No, Peter.
And he means to take the matter up with the trustees. So batten the hatches made it look like we're in for a stormy blow.
No.
Catherine, what is it? Kate, what is it?
Okay. Every time I get settled in the kitchen, this phone rings. I'm gonna make peace in this house. So he yanked this here phone out by the roots.
Hulda, will you please answer it?
Yeah? No, he ain't. No, she can't. No, I wouldn't.
Who was it, Hulda?
Couldn't say. Didn't recognize the voice.
Did they want Dr. Marshall?
Yeah. Chocolate is stale.
I'm sorry. Where's Peter John?
Out playing, I guess.
It's nearly dark. I think he should come in.
Yeah, guess he should. Got anybody to take my place yet?
No. Hulda, I wish you'd change your mind about quitting.
Fat chance. At that factory, I'll be making twice as much.
If it's only money, maybe we could pay a little more.
It ain't just the money. Be a much easier job. I could sit. This job here has been murder on my feet.
I don't know what we're going to do. You're the 5th housekeeper we've had in 6 weeks.
You've got a problem. Not everyone wants to come into a house where there's a sickness like yours.
But this is not contagious tuberculosis, Hulda. I can't infect anyone else.
So you said. Still, Party's got to look out for her health.
I don't know what we'll do. Peter's so overworked.
You asked me, you ought to be in a sanatorium.
But I can't leave Peter and Peter John.
Let the preacher take a room. Send the little boy to relatives. Close up this here house.
No!
You ain't never gonna get well till you go somewhere you'll have peace and quiet.
If you could stay just a few days longer.
Nope, today's my last. Got to rest up. If it ain't the phone, it's a doorbell. The trouble with you folks, you know too many people. Yeah, what do you want? Says his name's Joe. Joe Keating. Got to see your husband.
Joe, come in. It's been so long since we've seen you.
I didn't want to trouble you, Mrs. Marshall.
It's no trouble, Joe.
I'll just take these out of your way. All stale anyway.
You shouldn't be here at all, Mrs. Marshall. When you're sick,
I'm glad to see you. Pull up a chair.
I can't. I only came to say goodbye.
Goodbye.
I'm leaving Washington.
When, Joe?
Right away. If you tell Dr. Marshall...
Isn't this very sudden? Joe, you're running away.
No, I just decided not to be a burden on my sister and her husband anymore.
They know you're leaving?
Sure, it's okay with them. They got enough worries with their own kids. They don't want to be bothered with me.
Where are you going?
Going? New York, I guess. Yeah, New York.
Joe, Dr. Marshall will be home soon. He's speaking at a missionary society meeting. I wish you'd wait.
I can't. I shouldn't have come here at all. I just had to say thanks. You've both been so swell, and no matter what you hear, remember, I appreciate what you did.
What will we hear, Joe? You are in trouble.
Nothing you want to be mixed up in. Goodbye, Mrs. Marshall.
Joe, wait.
Tell Dr. Marshall not to blame himself. He did all he could. I guess they're right. Some guys are just born no good.
Joe!
Peter John Marshall, get back here and eat your supper!
No, Mother.
What is it, Peter John?
He won't eat his supper.
Why not, Peter John?
Because it's shredded wheat.
But I thought you liked shredded wheat.
I did, but I already had it for breakfast and lunch.
Hulda.
I never heard of no one getting too much shredded wheat.
Dad, Daddy will be home soon. He'll fix you what you like.
Mother, when are things gonna be like they used to be?
Soon, dear.
I like Hulda. I liked all the ladies, but they don't cook the way you do.
You must pray, Peter John. Pray that God will make me well.
I do, Mother. Every day I do. Daddy's home.
Hi, and how's Wee Peter this evening?
All right, but I'm not Wee Peter anymore.
Oh, and who are you?
I'm Big Peter.
I see, and who am I?
Enormous Peter.
Excellent idea. E.P. and B.P. And how's Kate?
Fine, dear. How was the Missionary Society meeting?
Missionary Society meeting?
Did Miss Bickle like your speech?
Oh, you don't want to hear about that. Here's Ellen to say hello. I don't mean to stay, Mrs. Marshall.
It's kind of you to stop by. That reminds me. Joe Keating came to see you. He was very upset. He said he was leaving town.
Really? I've been worried about Joe. He hasn't been attending church regularly.
Daddy, I'm hungry and Hulda says I have to eat shredded wheat.
No, well, suppose you and I have a man-to-man talk with Hulda. Alan, tell Mrs. Marshall your idea for the warm girl. All right, sir.
Are you afraid of Hulda, Daddy?
Not if you hold my hand.
Now, what's this idea?
Well, you know we've had trouble fixing up the youth room.
Yes?
I've been doing a little painting. I'm not very good, but I found it's a way to let off steam.
I'm sure it is.
So Dr. Marshall thought maybe I could do a mural on one wall of the youth room.
What would your subject be?
You know Dr. Marshall's sermon about the calling of the 12 apostles.
I think it's one of his best.
So do I. He makes Jesus and the apostles so real. Flesh and blood. I'd like to try to catch the feeling of that sermon in my painting.
Oh, I think that's an inspired idea, Alan.
I've been sort of fumbling, trying to find myself. Maybe this will help me too.
I'm sure it will.
If I can capture Dr. Marshall's vision, the Christ of the gospel striding up and down the dusty miles of Palestine, suntan, bronze, fearless.
You can, Alan. I'm sure you can. Would you mind? Hulda is allergic to bells.
Be glad to.
We mustn't stay. Mother will be worried.
Is that Nancy?
Yes, Mrs. Marshall. And Barbara.
This is a pleasant surprise.
We didn't mean to disturb you. But Nancy was so excited. She had to come and thank Dr. Marshall. Is he here?
In the kitchen with Peter John.
I'll tell him he has guests.
What's all this excitement? Why are you thanking my husband?
Oh, you should have heard him.
He was superb.
I'm green with envy.
Heard him where? When?
Why, at our high school assembly this afternoon.
High school assembly? But he was supposed to address the New York Avenue Missionary Society meeting.
Oh no, he promised Nancy he'd speak at our high school. Don't you remember?
Oh dear.
I was so afraid those kids would humiliate me by booing Dr. Marshall.
I would have given anything to have been there.
After I introduced him, I was all braced for trouble. I couldn't relax and listen. But then, I realized it was very quiet in the auditorium. There were no boos or catcalls. Everyone was listening, watching.
Tell about the gardenia.
Well, suddenly, I heard Dr. Marshall tell about my favorite flower, the gardenia.
What did he say?
He said, you know, a gardenia's petals reveal any telltale finger marks by turning brown. Well, your lives are like that. Purity is like that. Young people, don't give anything to the world to destroy. Don't be ashamed of dreams, high ideals, and beautiful thoughts.
That is lovely, Nancy.
He said the least he could ask was that God might plant in our hearts a yearning to meet the Galilean and know him as a friend. When he finished, there wasn't a sound. Then the whole school shook with applause. They cheered. They shouted. There's never been anything like it. Never.
Hello, Nancy. Barbara.
Dr. Marshall, I was just telling Mrs. Marshall about your address at the high school.
I guess I forgot to tell you, Kate.
I decided to speak at the high school instead of at the Missionary Society meeting.
Yes, you forgot.
It was a very fine audience, Nancy.
Only because of you. Well, I didn't get to see you afterward, and I wanted you to know.
I'm glad you came by.
Maybe someday you'd speak at my high school, Dr. Marshall.
Of course, Barbara, but don't make it too soon.
No, wait till the next meeting of the Missionary Society.
Guess I'll go along now too, sir.
All right, Alan, good luck with the mural. Oh, and by the way, if you should hear of anyone looking for a housekeeping job with a quiet, well-behaved family, send them right over, will you?
Yes, Dr. Marshall, we certainly will. Goodbye.
Peter Marshall.
Now, Kate, I had to go to that high school assembly.
But the Missionary Society, Miss Bickle?
Miss Bickle in the Missionary Society didn't really need or want me this afternoon. Those kids did.
But what did you tell her?
I asked Dr. Evans to go and I sent a note of apology.
There'll be trouble.
Very likely. Hello? Yes. Oh, yes, Mrs. Grant. Susan? Just a moment. Has Susan Grant been here this afternoon? I'm sorry, Mrs. Grant, we haven't seen her. All right, when she drops in, we'll have her phone you. At your office.
Susan's missing?
Her mother can't locate her. She says they had a disagreement. Mrs. Grant sounded quite concerned. But wait, in all this flurry, I haven't asked the most important question of all. How are you?
Don't ask me. I'm just looking for an excuse to cry.
Poor girl. I know how difficult it is lying here day after day.
Lying here when I should be helping you. Oh, Peter, just when you need someone strong and steady to lean on. Here I am, weak, useless. I'm a burden to you.
Hey, don't.
I'm sorry. I try not to give in to it. But days like this, and now Hulda's leaving, we've no one to take her place.
Who could take Hulda's place? Who else could clean a room and make it look dirtier?
All right, Hulda's no treasure.
That's generally agreed.
But she's better than no housekeeper at all.
By a very, very narrow margin.
Peter, be serious. What are we going to do?
Find someone else.
But this could go on and on. Maybe I'll never get well.
Kate.
I know. I should have faith in God. At first I did, Peter.
Kate, are you setting a time limit on God's mercy? Are you telling him when to help you? How to help you?
No. Peter, you can't understand. You're so strong and sure. I pray and I pray. But when I seem to get no better, I guess I'm not worthy of his help.
Kate. You're like wee Peter when he brings me a toy to be fixed. He's tried himself and failed, so he brings it to me. Then what does he do? He stands by, advising, criticizing. Sometimes he even gets so impatient he takes the toy right out of me hands. Isn't this what you're doing to our Heavenly Father?
I don't know.
You've gone to him for help, but now you're impatient because he's not proceeding in the way you think is best.
All I ask is what's best for all of us, Peter.
Kate, our worries are in his hands. Rest in the Lord. Wait patiently for him, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Let's ask him for strength, Kate, and patience. Hear us, dear Lord, as we pray for some who need stronger hearts. Thou art the great doctor who can do it. Will thou strengthen the hearts of them we name even now? We pray for some who are sick of tuberculosis. While human skill can do this and that and say, wait and rest, we know that thy skill can heal lungs. Hear us, dear Lord, as we pray for that.
Thank you, dear.
More visitors.
Hulda thinks we know too many people.
We are immoderately social.
I don't think she means to answer it.
Those who have ears to hear and hear not.
Doorbell's ringing.
How very, very observant you are.
I'll see who it is on my way out.
This is goodbye then.
It is. The little boy wants you to put him to bed.
All right.
It's cold hash for supper, or you can warm it if you're finicky.
Hot or cold, it tastes the same.
Peter, who's ever at the door?
I'm going. Just one thing more. In spite of everything, Dr. Marshall, I want you to feel free to use my name anytime you folks need a reference.
Hey, did you hear that?
I heard.
Well, aren't you overwhelmed by Hulda's generosity?
Excuse me.
Susan!
The woman at the door said to come in.
Of course. As a matter of fact, we've been expecting you.
Expecting me?
Your mother phoned a little while ago.
What did she tell you?
Only that she was worried. She wants you to phone her.
Dr. Marshall, what am I going to do?
Susan, what is it?
Don't cry, dear.
I've no right to come here and trouble you like this.
You know we want to help you.
I had no one else to turn to.
You've quarreled with your mother?
And with George. It was terrible, Dr. Marshall. They tried to make me set a date for the wedding. I just can't marry George. Not feeling the way I do.
Do you doubt George's love?
Oh no. George has been wonderful. I'm all to blame. I'm just afraid of marriage.
And you think running away will help?
I thought if I could get away from Mother for just a little while. I know it's a terrible time for you, with Mrs. Marshall sick, but I thought if I could stay with you for just a few days.
We want to help you, Susan, but we are short-handed.
I wouldn't be any trouble.
Of course you can stay.
Thank you.
But you must call your mother.
Must I? We'll only start quarreling again.
I'll call her, try to explain.
That would be wonderful, Dr. Marshall.
That doorbell is louder than Joshua's trumpet.
I don't want to see anyone else tonight. If Susan would help me upstairs.
Of course.
And I'll show her where she can put her things.
All right. You know, I'm beginning to sympathize with Hulda.
I'm ready for bed.
Just a minute, Simon. This is an unexpected pleasure, Senator Polk.
I'm not here for small talk. Where's that young thief?
Sit down, Senator Polk.
Don't think you can stall me. I listened to you 6 weeks ago, and this is the result.
What is the result?
One of those delinquents you coddle here has stolen more than $50 worth of equipment from my garage.
You must be mistaken, sir.
I am not mistaken. We have proof, an accomplice, and the man who admits receiving the stolen goods.
Who is it you're accusing, Senator?
A boy named Joseph Keating.
Joe.
We know he was here to see you this afternoon, Marshall. Now, if you're wise, you'll tell me where he's hiding.
I don't know. Joe did come by, but I was out.
Don't think you can shield this boy. This is one time when my methods for dealing with juvenile delinquents will be enforced.
Senator Polk, if Joe is guilty...
He is, and I no doubt will find that I'm only one of the people in this neighborhood the young hoodlum has victimized.
Daddy, the doorbell's ringing.
Answer it for me, will you, son? I know a good deal about Joe Keating's background, Senator. He comes from a home that...
I'm not interested. You let these young people use you, Marshall. You're too soft-hearted. I personally feel your coddling methods encourage juvenile delinquents.
I don't know what you consider coddling, Senator, but...
A crime is a crime. Anyone who violates the law must be punished. Age and background have nothing to do with it.
Daddy, 2 ladies are here, and one of them is mad.
Miss Pickle.
Good evening, ladies.
Dr. Marshall, I think you owe me and the 200 ladies of the New York Avenue Missionary Society an explanation.
200 ladies? Are they all with you?
Here's another 3, Dr. Marshall.
Daddy, is there anything I can do to help?
Yes, get Daddy a soda box. And hurry.
Oh, then what is it?
Dr. Marshall will be home from church soon. And
I know. I talked to him after the service. He's the one who suggested I stop by.
he did?
He preached a wonderful sermon at the 11 o'clock service soon about marriage.
He preached the same sermon at 9 o'clock.
Sue, you've been here for a month.
It's been a marvelous month.
Lonely month for me.
That night I came here, I was running away.
From me?
Partly. From mother, home, even myself. George, I was so sorry for myself. So mixed up and miserable.
But why'd you come here?
I don't know, or at least I didn't. Someone just seemed to tell me to come to the Marshalls. It's been a bad time for them too, George.
Sure, Mrs. Marshall being sick and all.
I was only going to stay overnight, but suddenly I realized there was a reason for my coming here. A bigger reason than just the fact that I felt sorry for myself.
A bigger reason?
The Marshalls took me in because that's the way they are. But they were in a terrible spot too, George. They needed someone to look after the house. They'd been praying night and day for an answer to their problem.
And then you walked in.
Then I walked in. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was in the right place, at the right time.
I'm glad, Sue.
Dr. Marshall says it was God's will that brought me here. And I believe that. And I know the peace of God has been with me ever since I decided to stay.
But for how long?
As long as I'm needed.
Well, what about us? Our marriage?
I know it's not easy for you, George, but if you could just be patient.
I can wait as long as need be if I have any reason to hope.
Oh, yes, you do, George. I love you. Every day here has made me more certain of that. I do love you.
Then I can wait. Oh, I forgot.
What? What is it?
I didn't come alone. Someone else wants to see you.
Well, George, I see you found your way.
Yes, sir. I was just going out to.
Are you going to marry with Susan, George?
Well, that was the idea, Peter John.
She's a good cook.
There's your recommendation, Susan.
She came, I haven't had to shred a week once.
Is Mrs. Marshall upstairs?
Yes, sir.
Come on, boy. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Grant. Susan, we found your father waiting outside, so we decided to bring him in.
Dad!
Hello, Sue.
If George doesn't marry with Susan, Daddy, can I?
I'll be in the party store. See you later, Sue.
Bye, George. Won't you sit down, Dad?
I mustn't. I only wanted to say hello. To be sure that you were all right.
I'm fine.
George invited me to go to church with him this morning. Dr. Marshall preached a moving sermon.
On marriage.
Sue, since you've left home, I've been doing a lot of thinking about our home. I mean, our family.
So have I, Dad.
All this misunderstanding between George and you, it's my fault.
No, Dad!
Yes. Because I haven't been much of a father.
That's not true!
Or much of a husband. But Sue, don't judge marriage by what you've seen in our home. It doesn't have to be like that. George is a fine man, not weak like me.
Oh, Dad!
I didn't mean to upset you, but this morning in church I saw so clearly where I failed you.
You haven't! You mustn't feel that!
You're happy here, aren't you?
Yes?
Your mother, she can't understand it.
She won't listen. It's so simple.
Mary distrusts anything that's simple, easy. Well, I mustn't keep George waiting. It's good to see you happy.
I wish you'd come back to visit, Dad. I want you to know Dr. Marshall.
I'd like to.
Sue, Mrs. Marshall, she's not in her room. And what's more, her robe is lying across the foot of her bed.
Her robe? Where could she be?
I don't know. Was she feeling worse this morning?
Well, she was very quiet.
What could she have done?
I'll see if I can find her, sir.
Well, does the pastor of New York Avenue have nothing better to do than stand daydreaming while...
Kate, I was so worried when I went to your room and you're dressed.
How very, very observant.
And you're wandering around as if...
As if I were a well woman.
Exactly. Now, will you please?
Peter, I'm going to be all right.
Of course you are, but the doctor says...
No, not what the doctor says, but what I know in my own heart.
Oh, dearest, last night I was in the depths of despair.
I sensed it was a bad time.
I couldn't sleep. I kept going over and over in my mind the prayers we'd said, the hopes we'd had. I was still awake this morning when you went to the services.
I didn't realize.
I lay there in the quiet, listening to the church bells, and suddenly I saw my mistake.
Mistake?
Darling, I've been demanding of God. I claimed health as my right. And never, not for 1 second, had I stopped rebelling against my illness. This morning, I saw there was only one way left.
Submission to His will.
Yes, and I prayed in a new way. I told God I'd done everything I knew to do, and it hadn't been enough. I was weary of trying to make Him give me what I wanted. If He wants me to be an invalid for the rest of my life, it's all right. I told Him to do whatever He likes with me and my life. Darling, the minute I said that prayer, I felt a strange new peace.
Kate.
I remembered all the stories from the New Testament of the people Jesus cured. And it seemed in each story, Jesus asked the person cured to do something, some small thing. So I asked Him what He wanted me to do, and He answered me, Peter. He really answered.
Of course He did.
He told me to get up and come and tell you, and I have, Peter. And I know that it's going to be all right.
I know that too, Kate. I've prayed so long for this moment. The moment when you could really trust yourself to Him. The answers always seem to come when our faith is so small that we expect the worst. But when we find the courage to take our hands off and really turn the problem over to Him, His help is unfailing. Now, Mrs. Marshall, if you'll rest yourself.
Dr. Marshall looked everywhere. Mrs. Marshall, we were so worried.
It's all right, Susan. The lost is found.
Shall I go on with dinner then?
Yes, and I think I'll try and have mine with the family.
Oh, yes.
What would we have done without Susan?
She was a godsend, and I mean that literally. George and her folks got fired to church.
Father, what kind of a man is he?
Quiet, reserved. I'm convinced we won't solve Susan's trouble until we help her mother and father.
Her mother does not want to be helped.
If ever I saw a woman who thought she had all the answers, it's Marion Grant. What must it be like being married to a person who's never wrong?
I like it.
Kate.
I'm teasing you, dear. You'd be the first to admit you were wrong.
If I ever were. No wonder Susan hesitates to marry George when she looks at her parents and their marriage.
Marion Grant's ambition has kept them from having a real marriage.
I've got to bring that family together for a talk. Talk, I almost forgot.
Forgot what?
Who do you suppose was waiting in my office after the 11 o'clock service?
Officers of the Peter Marshall Fan Club?
Impudent girl. No, it was Joe Keating.
Joe? But he's somewhere in New York.
Joe got that letter I sent and decided to come back and face the music.
I'm so glad, dear. But the senator threatened to.
Joe's ready to pay back the value of what he took. And I told him I was sure we could make Senator Polk understand that. How are you, Senator? I'm sorry to disturb you on a Sunday, but I have some news that will interest you. That boy who took that equipment from your garage? That's right, Joe Keating. He's come back. He wants to make full restitution, Senator. Well, he's agreed to come by the parsonage. He should be here in a few minutes. Yes, so if you could slip over, the three of us could sit down and... All right, Senator, we'll expect you. Hi.
You mean the senator's had a change of heart? I thought he wouldn't be satisfied until he had Joe behind bars.
Senator Polk is a reasonable man.
Are we thinking of the same Senator Polk?
Now, hey.
Isn't this the eminent authority on juvenile delinquency whose solution to the problem is to put everyone between the ages of 12 and 20 in prison?
The senator may have been a little extreme in some of his sentiments, but essentially he's...
I know, a reasonable man. And what reasonable solution to Joe's problem will the senator suggest?
I thought that Joe could serve a probation period, reporting 2 or 3 times a week to the senator and myself.
Proving that one misdemeanor doesn't make a hardened criminal?
That's it. Actually, this could do a great deal of good. The senator is recognized as an authority on juvenile delinquents. If we can use Joe to prove to him that these kids can be helped.
So long as Joe isn't hurt, Peter.
Of course Joe won't be hurt. This'll be Joe now. I got it, Susan.
I have never been so scandalized.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Marshall. I tried to keep them from coming here.
Hello, Alan. What's the trouble?
We don't need to upset you.
I mean for everyone to be as upset as I am.
Not everyone has your capacity, Aunt Judith.
Now, Alan, what's all this flirty about?
Well, isn't this terrible?
It is scandalous. After service, Dr. Marshall, my sister and I went into the youth room.
I see.
Judith and I have so many memories connected with that room. Why it was there,
Jessie, on one entire wall of that room, we found a coarse and vulgar painting which my nephew confesses he perpetrated.
You mean Alan's mural of the calling of the 12 apostles?
I mean that blasphemous depiction of Jesus and his disciples, which Alan splashed on that wall under your direction, Dr. Marshall.
But surely, Miss Bickle, Alan hasn't been guilty of...
I've been guilty of trying to capture the spirit of Dr. Marshall's sermon in paint, and Aunt Judith finds it offensive.
Worse than offensive, I've never seen anything like it.
And that automatically makes it bad?
Of course, Judith and I don't get to art galleries much.
This is not an art gallery. This is a room in New York Avenue that a nephew of mine should desecrate our church.
It's not your church exclusively, Aunt Judith. There are several hundred other members.
I've seen Alan's painting. In fact, I watched it in progress.
That is what I find so alarming, that you, the pastor of New York Avenue, should have encouraged a young man in this blasphemy.
That's such a strong word, Judith. The painting is startling.
Was startling, you mean, Aunt Jessie?
Was?
Aunt Judith ordered the janitor to paint over it.
You destroyed Alan's painting?
I had no alternative. If our pastor has no concern for the appearances, then we trustees must assume his responsibilities.
Miss Bickle, you had no right to obliterate that mural.
I had every right. I was protecting our young people and saving my nephew from disgrace.
Our young people were enthusiastic about Alan's painting. They seemed to find it inspirational.
Inspirational?
Yes, Aunt Judith, and after my being disgraced, you destroyed the only worthwhile thing I've ever done.
Now, Alan, dear.
I don't think your mural is great, but it did have feeling. I did succeed in capturing a little of Dr. Marshall's vision.
That mural was a living testimony to your belief, Alan.
Well, it's gone now. Aunt Judith can have the satisfaction of knowing that she destroyed my faith.
No, Alan.
You know why you had to wipe out my painting?
Because it was irreligious.
No, because I had feeling. And that's unforgivable. Your religion is like everything else about you. Bleak, narrow, and cold.
Alan, you mustn't.
You don't go to church because you long for his word or need his consolation. You go only because your family always has. Your religion is just an empty habit.
That's enough, Alan.
No, not quite. You've opposed Dr. Marshall because he sees religion as a living, vital force.
Alan, I know you mean well,
You
but...
hated my painting because I tried to picture Jesus as Dr. Marshall did. Suntan, bronze, fearless. You ain't pale, bloodless, anemic, Lord.
I won't hear any more.
You can't tolerate anyone else's ideas. If the way I painted the 12, a simple fisherman, workman, farmers, you couldn't bear that, Aunt Judith.
It was appalling.
Because they didn't look like your kind of people. They wouldn't have been acceptable in your church.
Jessie!
It's all right, Aunt Judith. You can rest easy. Your church is safe. I won't ever set foot in it again.
Alan, you don't mean that.
I do, sir. I'm clearing out. Not just out of your church, Aunt Judith, but out of your house. Not out of your tight, narrow little world.
Alan, you mustn't do this.
Alan!
He didn't mean
I
it.
hope you're satisfied, Dr. Marshall.
Miss Bickle, I would have given anything to have spared you this.
Don't play the hypocrite. You've been undermining my influence with my nephew ever since you came.
Oh, no, Peter.
And what you've done to Alan, you've done to the other young people at New York Avenue. You're determined to smash our traditions. Well, I'm just as determined that you won't succeed.
I don't ever wish to smash anything, but different people look at things in different ways.
I know, and your way is wrong. I've known that from the first, and I shall see to it that others know. Come, Jessie.
Alan means so much to her, Dr. Marshall, and to me.
You can't believe that I deliberately turned Alan against you.
No, I can't, but Judith said...
Jessie!
Yes, Judith. It's so hard to be caught between, Dr. Marshall. All my life I've been in the middle.
I'm not sure, Kate.
Dear, why are you rubbing your arm?
It's nothing. A little tingling sensation. Nerves.
Dr. Marshall, there's someone to see you.
To see me?
He waited in the kitchen till the Bickle sisters left.
Joe, come in.
I invited him to have dinner with us. I hope that's all right.
It's more than alright. It's obligatory.
I saw the Bickles coming in, so I decided to use the back door.
Welcome home, Joe.
I told Dr. Marshall I didn't want to cause any more trouble for you.
There's not going to be any more trouble, Joe. I've called the senator. He'll be here shortly. Won't you sit down, Joe? You look tired.
I am tired, Dr. Marshall. You get awful tired of running away. I knew all the time that it was crazy to run. But then, when I got your letter, I knew what I had to do.
It took courage to come back.
I'd never have made it if I hadn't thought about you, Dr. Marshall. I got no excuse for what I did. I stole. When the other guy suggested that we break into the senator's garage, I knew that it was wrong, that I ought to be influencing him. But instead, I thought of what that money would buy, and I stole.
If you needed money, Joe, you should have come to me.
You had your own problems, Dr. Marshall. Big ones. It seemed like everybody had big problems. Shouldn't be bothered with mine.
So you tried to solve your problems in your own way.
Yeah, and it was the wrong way. The money's all here, Dr. Marshall. You'll give it to the senator?
I want you to do that, Joe.
Okay. Whatever you say. I know I gotta be punished.
That's right, Joe, but there are different kinds of punishment. And I think you've already taken a lot of punishment. This will be the senator now.
I'm sure scared, Dr. Marshall.
It's all right, Joe. We're going to stand by you. When the senator understands it's your first offense and that you're willing to repay, I'm sure he'll be lenient.
If they just don't send me away. I've seen what happens to kids when they're sent away.
Don't worry, Joe.
No one's sending you anywhere.
Dr. Marshall,
Just show the senator in.
it's not Senator Polk who's here.
Well then, who is it?
A policeman, sir, and he says he's been ordered to arrest Joe Keating.
Wasn't that nice, Peter John?
It was awful quiet for Daddy.
Yeah, hear that? I'm criticized if I sing loudly, and I'm criticized if I don't.
I like it loud.
His father's son.
Shall we try something else, Dr. Marshall?
Not just now, Barbara. I think Peter John is right. We don't seem to have a spirit this evening. Perhaps we're thinking of absent friends.
Alan, for instance?
Has anyone heard from him since last Sunday?
No, George. His aunts have been frantic.
Well, what did they expect? Alan worked for more than a month on that mural.
And now it's hidden under a thick coat of white paint.
It was beautiful. Usually, I don't care much for paintings. But what Alan had done really meant something.
I'm sure everyone regrets his because hasty impulse.
And no one more than Miss Bickle.
I've been thinking about Joe.
So have I, Susan.
That's the boy Senator Polk is using as an example?
Yes.
I think it's so wonderful, Dr. Marshall. You standing by Joe, no matter what people say.
And they're saying a great deal.
You expecting someone, Dr. Marshall?
No.
Well, Barbara and I really should be on our way.
I've got to go home and address Christmas cards.
It doesn't seem possible. Christmas, less than a week away.
It seems possible to me.
Look who's here!
Alan!
You're in the army.
I didn't mean to crash a party.
It's not a party, Alan, and you're more than welcome.
In fact, we were just talking about you.
Sounds very dull.
Maybe now that you're here, Alan, Daddy will sing loud.
If he does, you'll have to hear him from your bed, young man.
Aw, please.
I'll take my Mrs. Marshall. Hug your mother good night.
Good night, Mother.
Good night, dear.
Good night, enormous Peter.
Good night, Peter. Don't forget your prayer.
Forget my prayers? Oh no, Daddy, not so close to Christmas.
I'm glad we got to see you, Alan.
Do you have to go?
We must. Will you be stationed near Washington?
For a while, please.
Then we'll be seeing you.
I hope so, Nancy.
Good night, Dr. Marshall.
We will. The uniform is very becoming, Alan.
Won't you sit down, Alan?
George, why don't you and I get to work on those dinner dishes?
Oh,
Sure.
Mr. Grant, we didn't invite you here to wash dishes.
I'd like to do it. We'll surprise Susan. Come on, boy. Be good practice for you.
Have you been to see your aunts? I wrote them from camp.
But you are going to go see them, aren't you, Alan?
No, Mrs. Marshall.
But they've been so worried.
It's a fine thing for a young man to serve his country, Alan. But for you to leave college in the middle of a term, there's nothing noble about my enlisting. I'm just running away.
From what?
My aunts, responsibility, myself.
We all know you were hurt by your Aunt Judith's action. But is this the answer? Hurting her in return?
Dr. Marshall, there have been times in the past few months where I thought I might have a call to the ministry.
Catherine and I had high hopes.
Last Sunday, I knew I was wrong. I can never be a minister.
Why? I think you have all the qualifications.
No, if I were going to try to serve God, I'd want to give him my best. Try to be as honest and uncompromising as you are, Dr. Marshall.
I understand.
That painting was my last attempt to express my feelings about God, about the ministry. When Aunt Judith destroyed it, I realized I'd never have the courage to fight for my ideals.
You're underestimating yourself, Alan.
No, Mrs. Marshall. I haven't the patience nor inner strength.
When you give your life to him, Alan, he provides the strength and patience you need.
I'm not worthy of him. When the going gets rough, I run away. Needs more men like you, Dr. Marshall.
We all have times when we'd like to run away.
But you don't. I better go along now, sir. I just wanted to say hello.
We will see you soon again.
I hope so. Goodbye, Mrs. Marshall.
Goodbye, Alan.
I wish you'd change your mind, Alan, about seeing your aunts. The months ahead won't be easy for you. And if you're carrying a grievance...
I'm sorry, Dr. Marshall. I have nothing to say to them. Goodbye.
If you could only understand and forgive.
Dear, is your arm still bothering you?
No, Kate, it's just a habit.
You promised me you'd check with the doctors.
I will next week. I've been so busy.
Too busy. You've spent so much time with Joe.
If they send that boy away, Kate.
The senator's making political capital of the case now. He can't back down. It's your philosophy against his.
With Joe keeping in the middle, Joe would have been better off if I hadn't been staying. As an ordinary first offender, he would have been given a suspended sentence. Now, Senator Polk is using all his influence to make an example of Joe.
Trying to discredit you.
The senator and Miss Bickle had called a special meeting of the trustees this week.
Do you think any of the other trustees have been influenced?
I don't know. I'm prepared for the worst. I've ordered a dozen boxes of soda.
I know he's here.
Mother, please.
I know you've all been talking about me.
Mother, don't.
Where is he?
Good evening, Mrs. Grant.
If you're speaking of your husband, Mrs. Grant, he is here. We invited him for dinner.
You were invited too.
But you told me you had to work.
First you took my daughter from me, turned her into a maid.
That's not true. I came here because I wanted to.
Now it's Stephen.
If you'll sit down, Mrs.
What are you trying to do, Dr. Marshall? Destroy our home?
No, Marion. No one could destroy our home because we've never had one.
Stephen!
Dr. Marshall has been helping me understand why we never had a home. Why Susan had to leave us to find out what marriage really is.
Leave us?
Dad's right. Living here with the Marshalls, I've stopped being afraid of marriage. I've seen what it can be.
Doesn't have to end like ours, Marion. Two people going their separate ways, sharing nothing,
Staying together only for convenience and appearance?
If our marriage failed, it isn't because I didn't try to save it. I don't know what Stephen's been saying about me.
Sit down, Mrs. Grant. Sit down.
I won't be intimidated.
I have no wish to intimidate you or anyone. Why did you assume your husband would be talking about you?
Because I know Stephen, he's weak. If something goes wrong, he has to find someone to blame, usually me.
That's strange. In all our conversations, I've never heard your husband utter one word of complaint against you. He blames himself. He feels he was indecisive and weak. It seems you and your husband agree. You both blame him for the failure of your marriage.
Well, I haven't said much, though it hasn't been easy.
Hasn't it? What have you sacrificed, Mrs. Grant?
Sacrifice?
A marriage means sacrifice. A woman has to be willing to give up her own ambitions, lose herself in the life her husband chooses.
That's an old-fashioned idea.
Of course it is, as old-fashioned as the word of God.
Where would we have been if I hadn't worked, stayed with my career? Together in some wretched little subdivision house just getting by.
Your husband has always had a good job. He earns a very comfortable living.
Why, in a good month, I make as much as Stephen does in half a year.
My point is there was no real economic necessity for you staying with his career after you're married.
Stephen had no drive, no ambition.
Then you should have been ambitious for him, not for yourself.
I wanted Susan to have things.
But you've given me the wrong things, Mother. Unimportant things.
We've ended up with a lot of money, Marion, but our marriage is bankrupt.
You're all against me. Things have gone wrong, so I'm to blame?
Are we both to blame?
I did what I thought was best.
Best for your marriage and your family. Weren't you just unwilling to make marriage a full-time job?
This is the 20th century. Women have learned to mix marriage and career.
Have they? I think when a woman is forced to work after her marriage, it's always a regrettable necessity. Being a wife and mother demands all the energy that the average woman can give. Divide your energy and something suffers. Too often it's the marriage.
There's no point in my staying here. It's clear I'm your scapegoat.
No one's a scapegoat. We want to help you, Mrs. Grant.
It's not too late, Marion.
Isn't it? I thought Susan was ready for marriage now, inspired by the Marshalls.
Susan's all right. I'm thinking of us. If we made a new start...
All right, excuse yourself by blaming me. I don't care.
Mrs. Grant, marriages are made in heaven, but they have to be lived on earth. Heaven comes to earth only as we work for it. There's no wound God can't heal, no problem He can't solve. If you'll just get down on your knees and ask God's help, you'll get it.
Please, just let me go. I'm sorry I came here.
Marion.
Mother, don't go.
Marion, wait.
Stay with her now. She needs you.
I think I should be going. Thanks for everything.
I'm glad you could stop by, George.
And George,
Yes, sir?
when you and Susan are married, remember what you heard here tonight. No two lives become one without some painful adjustments. Every couple has little quarrels, misunderstandings. Am I right, Mrs. Marshall?
Yes, dear.
But if you pray together, you'll find God smoothing the way. You just can't pray together and stay mad at each other. Try it.
We will, sir. Good night.
Good night, George.
I'll see him out.
Do you think the Grants have a chance?
A chance. The sacrifice won't be easy for her. Material success has come to mean too much.
We've so much to thank God for.
For giving us each other and Peter John.
No matter what's ahead, we'll have His help.
And no man needs more than that.
Was there anything else?
I don't believe so, Susan.
Then I think I'll go up now. Night, Dr. Marshall. Mrs. Marshall.
Good night, Susan. I'm a little tired too.
You go up. I've still some work to do.
You won't stay down late? Promise?
Promise. Hello, this is Dr. Marshall. I say this is Dr. Marshall. Sorry, the clocks are striking. Is this Miss Jessie Bickle? I know it's late to call, but I wanted to tell you and your sister that Alan was here. Yes? Yes, he seems well. He said he's written you. Do you plan to answer his letter? I see. I suppose that's your sister's decision? I know she's proud, but Alan is proud too. I wouldn't suggest that you go against your sister's wishes, but forgiveness has to begin somewhere. I know you hate being in the middle. Well, get down to the middle. Take a stand of your own. If you want to write to Alan, write to him.
if you care to talk it over with me? No, I suppose not. Well, I wanted to tell you and your sister that Alan was all right. Yes, goodbye, Miss Jessie. Lord Jesus, when we are wrong, make us willing to change. And when we are right, make us easy to live with. We thank you.
I saw your lights. Thought I'd look in.
Glad you did. Won't you sit down, Senator?
I think better on my feet.
And if you'll excuse me.
I suppose you've seen these?
Not all of them.
They're pretty much the same. Making a big thing out of this Keating case. It's getting out of hand.
I agree.
All of this publicity is bad. You and I at Swords Point over a delinquent who didn't even belong to the church.
But Joe does belong, Senator. And even if he didn't...
The point is, your friends in the church feel you should step out of the picture. That will take the spotlight off the case, and the boy's trial can be quickly disposed of.
That's simple, is it?
Exactly. I can get back to the Senate, and you to your pulpit.
Which is where I should have stayed?
A minister's place is in his church.
Joe Keating and boys like him need God's help. And they'll get it only through ministers like me. You feel you're an expert on juvenile delinquency?
Well, I've studied the problem. My reports have been widely circulated.
I've read those reports, Senator. So far as I can see, all this is that you're against it.
Well, now...
Everyone's against it, deplores it. But what can we do to stop it?
I've made my stand clear.
Yes, you have. Law enforcement without mercy. Your recommendations offer reprisals against these youngsters who've fallen out of step with our laws.
Fallen out of step? Do you call stealing falling out of step?
Yes, I do. A thief must be punished, but the age and background of the thief should dictate the kind of punishment he receives.
More coddling.
Far more important than the punishment is the help we owe these youngsters.
Help? Look here, I didn't come to listen to a lot of theories.
No, you came here to tell me I had to desert Joe Keating. Well, I'm telling you, Senator, I have no intention of deserting him.
Your trustees may have something to say on that score.
No doubt, but I'm saying this to you, Senator Polk. You and men like you have to stop thinking of what can be done to juvenile delinquents and start thinking what can be done for them.
You're in no position to hand out any advice.
You come here in your cloak of righteousness like the Pharisees in the New Testament. You've got a stone in your hand and put a helmet at Joe and any kid like him.
I've heard one sermon today.
Then stay and listen to another. Remember what our Lord had said to those Pharisees, Senator? He that is without sin, let him cast the first stone. We've got to stop coming to the problem of our young people with stones in our hands.
I made my position clear.
We act more childish and willful than the youngsters. We've forgotten the meaning of forgiveness. And there's no greater need in the world today than this, the need of forgiving one another. The whole world is crying out for forgiveness. Husbands and wives, parents and children, we need forgiveness. To forgive and be forgiven. Without this, our troubled hearts, our troubled hearts.
Dr. Marshall, what is it?
Senator, I'm in great pain. Will you please call my wife? Hey!
Shh! We're supposed to be very, very quiet.
Why?
The doctor says. Got to do what the doctor says, Daddy.
I've been doing what the doctor says for 3 months and more.
I didn't mean to bother you.
Bother me? Since when does a boy bother his dad?
But I promised Mama.
I know. The way your mother and that doctor act, you think my ears were weak instead of me hard. Taking away my phone, stopping my thoughts, and turned my son into a whispering pussyfoot.
They're being loud, Daddy. The doctor says.
I know, all right. Run along and lead me to my deafening quiet.
Yes, Dr. Marshall? You rang?
I did, and it was such a relief to hear some noise. I think I'll ring again. Yes, my telephone, a blaring radio, and a room full of people.
Now, Dr. Marshall, you know what?
The doctor says that man is more quoted than the president.
There's nothing more I can do, sir.
But there is. Name me a game of Parcheesi.
Dr. Marshall!
Chess.
Now you know perfectly well.
Tiddlywinks.
No games. You get much too excited.
Of course I get excited. What's the point of playing a game if you don't?
But excitement is bad for you.
So the doctor says. I'm of the opinion that all this quiet is much worse.
Excuse me.
They've even muffled the doorbell. It's a wonder Kate doesn't insist visitors send up smoke signals. They'd be much quieter. You sound like a pit of vipers hissing out there. Come in.
You didn't mean to disturb you.
Well, I mean to be disturbed.
Mrs. Marshall said we could have our meeting in the back garden.
Why not have it right here?
You know how loud these meetings can be, sir.
The noisier the better.
You may all say hello, then out to the back garden.
Susan! George, this woman is a tyrant. Be warned.
I know, sir, but I'm taking it for better or worse.
I brought you this book, Dr. Marshall. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you, Nancy. That's very thoughtful. Silence is golden. Now there's
Mrs. Marshall's suggestion.
I should have guessed.
I wanted you to have these flowers, Dr. Marshall.
Thank you, Barbara. They're certainly pretty. Better put them in water right away, Susan, before those heavy petals start crashing to the floor. The din would be unbearable.
How are you feeling, sir?
Perfect.
We certainly miss you.
Seems strange to hear someone else preach the Easter sermon today.
Strange for me to be here, George, instead of in the pulpit.
If he behaves and does as the doctor says,
Oh.
Mrs. Marshall thinks he'll be able to marry George and me.
But that's not until June, and this is April.
I'm gathering my strength too, sir.
Nancy and I are going to be bridesmaids.
And I've been practicing to catch the bridal bouquet.
What good will it do you, Nancy, with Alan in the army?
He won't be in the army forever.
How is Alan?
Fine. He needs to stop by later, he said.
I haven't had a real talk with him in months.
I should have known. My husband would gather a crowd at the North Pole.
I tried, Mrs. Marshall.
She did valiantly. Don't blame your jailer.
It's not that I want to be inhospitable.
She just wants to keep her poor husband isolated.
Mom, Dad.
Hello, dear.
I didn't expect to see you here.
They were kind enough to bring me home, so I insisted they come in and say hello. I thought Peter might be lonely.
We can't stay.
Come in, come in.
We're on our way to the back garden.
It's been wonderful seeing you, Dr. Marshall.
I hope this hasn't been too much excitement.
Best medicine I've had.
I'll put these flowers in a vase, and I'll see you before you go.
We'll stop by the kitchen.
Sit down, sit down.
We mustn't.
Marion and I are going house hunting.
Really?
The place we have now is so ridiculously expensive and impractical.
We want a house with some land.
I think that's so wise.
What he means is we want a house designed for grandchildren.
Well, with Susan and George getting married in June.
It pays to be foresighted.
Dr. Marshall, for a long time I've wanted to thank you.
Thank me?
That night here, you made me really look at myself. I despised what I saw. If it hadn't been for you.
Don't thank me, Mrs. Crabbe. Thank God.
We do.
When I think of all the years we've lost because of my selfishness.
Don't think of those lost years. Think of the years ahead of you.
Of course. You know, all those years I was struggling to make a career for myself, I had to keep convincing myself that what I was doing is worthwhile. But now I feel as if I'm carrying out a plan, a divine plan.
And the difference it's made in my work. You wouldn't believe it.
But I would. Every man would like to understand his worth, build up his self-esteem, encourage his hopes. That's God's intention.
Young women need to be helped before they make the mistake I did. You must get well quickly, Dr. Marshall. You're so badly needed.
Peter feels that need, Mrs. Grant. But first...
First, he must get well, and we're tiring him. Come along, dear.
You haven't tired me. You can't know how good it makes me feel to see you two here together. Really together.
We'll look in again soon.
Don't bother seeing us out, Mrs. Marshall. We'll stop in the kitchen for a word with Susan.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks for the lift.
And God keep you, Dr. Marshall.
You too.
Isn't that wonderful?
The surprising thing to me, Kate, is that so few husbands and wives ask God's help when their marriages are failing.
They won't take the time to discover what His grace can do.
Of course, first there must be agreement between them.
Of course.
It doesn't do for the wife to beg God for one thing, while all the time the husband's asking for something contrary.
I know.
Kate, are we praying towards the same end?
We both want you well and strong again.
True, but short of that?
I don't want anything short of that.
Kate, a long time ago in Scotland, I made a bargain with God.
Yes, I know.
I gave my life to Him to use whatever, however He wanted.
Yes, but...
There were no ifs, ands, or buts. I put myself completely in God's care. I promised to devote my best to the ministry, leaving the result, including my health, entirely up to Him.
Peter!
My best, Kate.
Your best demands too much of you! You know what the doctor has said.
The doctor isn't concerned with this bargain of mine.
What about me? Am I concerned?
Of course you are. Oh, Kate, it's so important that we be in agreement on this.
You can serve Him, Peter, but in new ways. Ways that won't strain your heart. If you tried to preach and work as you did before, it would be throwing your life away.
Not if I was serving God.
There are many kinds of service.
You want me to avoid those in trouble? You want me to refuse to involve myself with men and women who desperately need me? You want me to be a narrow, limited man? A minister who always thinks first of himself? Is that what you want?
I want you to live. That's all I want. I just want you to live.
Kate, I'm sorry. I don't mean to hurt you.
I know, dearest. I want to feel as you do. But I'm weak. Maybe I've asked God for too little. Maybe He wants to kill your heart, so you won't have to lead a limited life.
Perhaps. But dear, it's for Him to decide.
Forgive me. I scold others for tiring you. Then I come in and stage a scene.
Stop blaming yourself, Kate, and don't worry. God will show you the way when the time comes. He always does.
I'm too impatient. I'd better check on Peter John. Anything I can do for you?
You might give me a minus left to penetrate this blue.
All right, I'll pull the curtains. But you're to stay in that chair. There.
Now, if you'll get to my radio and telephone...
No, positively not. Relax and content yourself.
Yes, I agree. Silence is golden. Fool's gold. Saved by the muffled doorbell.
It must be someone for the young people's group in the back garden.
Send him in here first. Senator Polk.
Good to see you, Dr. Marshall. I was just dropping Joe off for a meeting, so I thought I'd look in.
Glad you did. And how's Joe?
Fine, sir. You're looking well.
Hear that, Mrs. Marshall?
I heard. Won't you sit down, Senator?
Thank you. Joe and I just finished eating our Easter dinner. Sort of a celebration.
Celebration?
Yes, sir. Senator Polk thought we should celebrate my new job.
What job?
Joe's going to be a Senate page, Mrs. Marshall. He starts tomorrow.
Oh, Joe. How wonderful.
I'd like to shake your hand again.
We wanted you and Mrs. Marshall to know first.
I couldn't be happier, Joe, for your sake.
I know, and for mine. Joe and I have both come a long way since that night I argued with you here, Dr. Marshall.
I don't like to think of it as an argument, Senator. Let's say you stated your viewpoint and I stated mine.
And when I compared the two, I saw how empty mine was. You know, until that night, Dr. Marshall, it had been a long time since I prayed. I mean, really prayed. Oh, I'd said the standard words, but there had been nothing in my heart until that night.
I'll never forget. You were so helpful.
All the time we were waiting for the doctor and ambulance, I kept thinking of what you'd said to me about the need for forgiveness.
I remember.
It occurred to me that if you died that night, I might never have the chance to ask your forgiveness, that you might never know that you had touched me. So I started to pray.
I see.
At first, I was only praying automatically, but gradually there was a difference. It wasn't just words. I was begging from the bottom of my heart that you be spared.
Thank you, Senator.
But as I prayed, I realized that instead of asking your forgiveness, I should do something to prove I was worthy of it. That's when I decided to work with Joe instead of against him.
I couldn't believe it that next morning when the senator came to see me.
It wasn't easy.
Of course it wasn't.
But as I got to know Joe, I saw how wrong I'd been, trying to fight juvenile delinquency with hate instead of love.
Senator, that night just before you came here, I was deeply troubled. So I said a little prayer.
What was it?
Lord Jesus, when we are wrong, make us willing to change. And when we are right, make us easy to live with.
Every member of Congress should have that prayer before him.
Or even better, sir, the man who thought of it.
Right, Joe.
What's this?
Joe's reminding me that I didn't come here to talk about myself. That's the politician's failing.
Doesn't that man know that Daddy can't be where it's loud?
Peter, John.
Son, forgive me. After so many years in politics, I've lost the art of being quiet.
Mama could teach you.
She said
Dr. Marshall, Joe and I have had an idea that we think is one of our best. Right, Joe?
Right, sir. And we hope you'll agree, Dr. Marshall.
Catherine, tell the senator that suspense is bad for me.
All right, I'll come straight to the point, which is a great sacrifice for me. With your consent, I'd like to nominate you as chaplain of the United States Senate.
Chaplain of the Senate? Me?
Yes, sir. Wouldn't it be a wonderful challenge?
Kate, did you hear that?
You'd be a chaplain they'd listen to.
A few years ago, I was a Scottish immigrant. Now I'm asked to accept the nomination as chaplain of the Senate.
Exactly.
But of course you understand, Senator, it has to be not what I want, or what you want for me, but what God wants me to do. I have to have a green light from Him before I make any decision.
Remember a sermon you preached, sir, called The American Dream?
Indeed I do.
Every man and woman who owns the name of Jesus must fight together to make America good enough to lead the world, to make the American dream of opportunity come true for all.
Every man and woman. And this is my chance to fight for that dream.
Accept the nomination and you'll be elected.
The three of us could serve the Senate together.
It would be a great honor, not for myself, but a chance to do God's work in a new setting.
You can reach others as you reached me. We need a conscience in the Senate.
It would be a very, very great responsibility.
But a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, the greatest opportunity to serve Him I've ever had.
Then, with your consent, I'll present the nomination tomorrow.
You mustn't nominate me, Senator.
Mustn't nominate you? I don't understand.
I can't accept the nomination.
Why, sir?
My doctor thinks I must restrict my activities. If I'm to live with this heart of mine, I must do less and less.
Peter.
I'm sorry. I didn't know.
I appreciate your thinking of me, Senator. If circumstances were different.
Of course. Well, I'd better be going. And Joe, you're overdue for that meeting in the back garden.
Yes, sir.
Take care of yourself, Dr. Marshall. Don't bother to see me out, Mrs. Marshall. I'll manage. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Senator.
I hope this hasn't been too much of a strain, sir.
No, it's good to see you doing so well, Joe. Keep those senators in line.
I'll try, sir.
Run and play, dear. I'll be out in a minute.
All right. Stay quiet, enormous Peter.
I will, son.
Dearest, I know what it cost you to refuse that challenge.
I'd rather not talk about it, Kate.
Well, I'd better check on the meeting in the back garden. If you want anything, just ring the bell.
If I want anything, dear Jesus, we would find you in the privacy of our own hearts, in the quiet of this moment. We would know, O God, that you are near us and beside us. Dear Jesus, Help us to know that when we reach up to you, you are reaching down to us. We ask in the name of Jesus our Lord. Amen.
Dr. Marshall?
Miss Pickle, what a pleasant surprise. And Alan, too.
We brought you an Easter bouquet.
How thoughtful.
Won't you sit down? Thank you. And let me put these lovely flowers in some water.
It's been a long time, sir.
Too long. Army life seems to agree with you.
Doesn't he look handsome in his uniform?
Now, Aunt Jessie, you'll turn my head.
These days I say what I feel. I wasted too much of my life being afraid to speak out.
How is your sister?
Very different.
As a matter of fact, Aunt Judith is outside now.
Outside, we'll ask her in.
She won't come in.
She's embarrassed, Dr. Marshall.
I think that Judith feels...
Kindly stop telling people what I feel, Jessie.
Judith!
Miss Pickle, come in.
I am in, Dr. Marshall. I don't know what these two have been saying about me.
Nothing Dr. Marshall hadn't suspected.
I wasn't going to come in here today.
Well, I'm glad you changed your mind. It's nice to see you.
I've something to say to you, Dr. Marshall, and putting it off isn't going to make it any easier. I decided that this was as good a time as any.
Miss Pickle, you don't have to say anything.
I do. I've been a member of New York Avenue all my life.
In fact, Papa had us both enrolled before we were born, so you might...
Jessie. Over the years, I began to think of New York Avenue as my church. I was sure that I knew what was best for the church, that my way was the only way to worship.
Papa used to call Judith this immovable object.
Most of my life, nothing budged me. Then I met you, Dr. Marshall.
The irresistible force.
You came crashing into New York Avenue, knocking all my ideas every which way.
Letting air and sunlight into the place.
I didn't want to be changed. I was afraid to really examine the traditions I defended. So I attacked you.
With vigor.
I was wrong. I was wrong about you, about the church, about Alan. I almost lost Alan before I realized how wrong I'd been.
Aunt Judith.
Before I faced up to the fact that I was wrong. Then God gave me the courage to write Alan and ask his forgiveness. As I'm asking yours now.
God bless you, Miss Pickle.
We need you at New York Avenue. Come back to us soon. After all, what's Peter Marshall's church without Peter Marshall?
Oh, Judith, you can be so nice.
This is for you. It's not much, but they did tell me it was old and rare. And noisy.
A clock.
Probably doesn't keep good time at all.
I've never had a nicer gift.
Well, Alan, how are you getting along?
All right.
You've adjusted to army life?
I had to. It wouldn't adjust to me. There have been some bad times. But thanks to Dr. Marshall, I knew where to turn for help.
I'm glad to hear you say that. When you went into the army, you were running away from our Lord, from the ministry.
And instead, I ran right into his arms.
Alan, are you saying that?
As soon as my army duty's over, I'm going to study for the ministry.
Oh, Alan, that's wonderful. Isn't it? I'm so happy I just cried and cried.
All gone. I was excusing my own weakness by turning you into a sort of Superman who never had any problems, never had to struggle.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
I know. The greatness in you, sir, comes from your refusal to give up, even when the odds seem all against you. You've dedicated your life to God, so you never once allowed yourself to forget that.
I've tried to keep my thought again.
I'll need all the help I can get. But come what may, I'm going to turn my life over to him. To use as he sees fit.
He'll make good use of you, Alan. He's given you a sanctified imagination.
Alan's being shipped overseas next week, Dr. Marshall.
So soon?
God will keep you in his care.
I'm not afraid, sir. Once I might have been.
It's only when we don't know him that we're afraid. When we do, there's nothing to fear. When we're not afraid of death, then we're no longer afraid at all.
I've tried to explain that to some of the other men, sir.
If you're afraid to die, then you're afraid to live.
And when we're no longer afraid of death, then we begin to live.
The important thing isn't how long we live, but how well. Whether or not we kept our bargain with God.
Well, I wanted to look in on the gang in the back garden.
Alan, wait. Ask the gang to come in here.
Here?
That's right. All of them.
Okay, Mrs. Marshall.
Perhaps Judith and I had better leave
No,
if...
please.
I want to stay.
And we want you to. Don't we, Peter?
Indeed we do.
Why, I hadn't noticed. All your clocks are stopped.
A foolish whim of mine. We're starting them all again. Aren't we, Peter?
If it's what we both want.
It's what we both want. We've lost so much time.
Alan said we should come in here.
That's right.
But I thought the doctor said...
You're feeling better, sir?
Much better. Immoderately good.
And Joe?
Yes, Mrs. Marshall?
He's going to call Senator Polk and tell him we want to try for that nomination.
Kate!
What nomination?
Dr. Marshall's going to be nominated chaplain of the United States Senate.
Barbara, can you still play the piano?
Yes, sir, if you're sure.
Play something, Barbara. Something Scotch and loud.
How about the Bluebells of Scotland?
Daddy, the doctor says.
Never mind, laddie. Let's hear you sing. Sing loud.
Mr. Baker, could you come down front, please? As a small token of our appreciation for the immense effort and time that Mr. Baker poured into us to make sure that this was a success, we got you something. Thank you.
nights and the many hours he has put into preparing the students for this excellent presentation were made possible because of Mrs. Baker. And we want to tell her thanks very much on behalf of Yesterday afternoon or evening, we presented some balloons filled with helium to Mr. Baker. And they were intended to give him a free ticket to wherever he wants to go, since we are not wealthy enough to pay the airfare. And this is a certificate for a brunch, a dinner, or a breakfast, whatever you want, for your entire family and the school. If you want to have it in Hawaii, we will still honor the ticket. Cast, I want to let you know that we are currently arranging a very special candlelight supper for all of you to tell you that you were super califragilistic. Thank you.